Welcome to Success Talks, an exclusive podcast for our Yellow Magazine contributors. Success Talks features life-enhancing interviews with real people in professional roles and small businesses, providing our listeners tools, insights, and thought leadership to help restore life balance and redefine success. Each interview is varied and includes key lessons designed to help you focus your mind, improve productivity, and enable freedom and fulfillment. Enjoy today's episode.
Welcome to another monthly book review with Sharon Leigh. This month, the book is phenomenal. We've taken it up a notch. And when I say we, I actually mean Sharon. Sharon has chosen to review You Are What You Risk, The New Art and Science of Navigating an Uncertain World by Michele Wucker. Sharon, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Sharon, and I would say I'm a neurodivergent, non-binary coach, trainer. I'm not going to run my list. You can look in the show notes for the LinkedIn thing. I'm a curious animal.
Superhuman with all the talents.
Yeah.
Please tell us, why are you drawn to this book?
Because it's her new book, and so I had to, in the little text that I sent you, she wrote the book, The Gray Rhino, and that was about how to recognize and act on obvious dangers that we ignore. And to me, that was very obvious. And I know it's going to sound like I'm giving a book review of that one, but this one comes on the back of that one. And I recognized immediately that it's the things that that are there and they're obvious, that it seems like I see them all. And like, I always ask myself, why doesn't anybody see that? Why isn't anybody talking about that? It seems to me so obvious, and they're avoidable. A lot of things that are avoidable. But I thought about it in terms of like relationships, or clients. And so I would always think about that. And I think, oh, she should write another book. And then she did. And I was like, oh, great. So she speaks about that and about, like risk and hold on a second here. Yeah, she speaks about the risk and how to discern, what it has to do with decision making. And I find all this fascinating. And it's not the same kind of book as The Gray Rhino, whereas like people say, well, I've never heard of that. And so of course people have heard about risk and they hear about the relationships and the decision making, but she puts it in easy language, and the way she writes about it is easily digestible, but it gives great points. And I think it's like people can take each part of it and think deeper about it. If you read it just on the surface, well, that's up to you. But there's ways to look at it and think about it in different contexts, and think deeper on it, because it's actually very simple. The concepts are very simple. And so she's not the first person, but she collects a lot of stuff and puts it in one place. So it's a good reference book, I think. And I will be referencing parts of it because she does all the work. And so if I'm talking about something, I can say, Michele Wucker, has it in her book about this. So go and read that. I don't have to repeat it. And so I like it when people write books and give me reference material. So this is why it's really good. And for people working in like risk areas, to kind of take the jargon out of these fields and speak about it in a more understandable layman's terms, it's great. Yeah, she does a really good job.
To me, it sounds quite complicated risk. There's multi-levels, there's no one size fits all, there's different circumstances. Is there a simple way of summarizing how to evaluate risk and then move through it?
There's all kinds of models. I mean, like for what? And I have a friend that works as a consultant for the German government about man-made catastrophes. And oh God, he's got stories. And actually, I found out about Michele Wucker from him, and so yeah, so listening to the stories about avoidable risk and how you assess it, but like in, if you bring it into, I want to say real life for people personally, it's like, okay, how long do you drive on your tires before you make the decision to get a new set of tires? How far are you going to push that line? Or how far are you going to drive and let your gas tank get down on empty when it's an old car and there's rust in the gas tank, right? And so it's that if you let it get down really far and you put new gas in it, it's going to make all the rust particles at the bottom percolate up, which then sticks in your in the mechanics, or the fuel injector. And so so little things like that we do every day, all the time. And so it's like, what is that? One of the, and I always think like this, I can't help it. I guess I'm hardwired. And so I end up most of the time asking myself, well, that was obvious. Why don't people know that? Why aren't they doing that? But then people can ask me the same thing about like, why don't I organize my notes so I can find them later? I could see that coming a mile off, that's obvious to them. But I think one of the points is I picked out like 7 things that, humans need to absorb and learn about ourselves. But that everybody has a risk fingerprint, and it's like how we deal with little things. And it's not super risky, or something that seems super risky for one person is very low risk for another person.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. So knowing our own risk fingerprint and our own comfort around risk and is important to know. But then it's like, okay, everybody's is different. Everybody's relationship with risk is unique and complex. So that we can't, which a lot of people do, as you I'm sure you've experienced, people will put their own risk comfort bias onto other people. And they'll say, well, come on, it's just such and such. And then other people are like, oh my God, no. For example, when I talk about, contacting people, that seems to a lot of people very risky and a high risk thing to do. I don't understand that, because I'm like, well, what are they going to do? What if they say no, or they don't answer or something?
Yeah, what's the real harm there?
What's the harm? Are they going to take my arm off? Are they going to come to my house and cut my leg off?
But you're thinking physical, but they might be thinking maybe emotional risk.
Well, they feel it. I don't know that they feel it for sure. There's something risky in there for them, but I'm not quite sure, because when I have a conversation, I'm like, what are you afraid of? And they're like, and they can't tell me.
Yeah.
So the awareness of it is I think very, very interesting. Now, Michele doesn't go deeply into that because she's a researcher, which is why I want to have a conversation with her. And she's one of the people, it's like I went out and like just contacted her. And I got a positive feedback. Now, we haven't had a chat yet, and I don't want to bug her, be like, going, can we chat? But I want to talk to her. And so that to me is not a risk. It's not emotionally risky. What if she turns me down and says, I was thinking about it, I don't have time. It's like, okay, no big deal. But I do understand that for a lot of people, that's emotionally very loaded. My mother used to speak about that. She said, so what is emotionally loaded for us? And then what is easier to do than, like, for example, public speaking is really emotionally loaded for a lot of people. It's terrifying for a lot of people. I mean, it's not super pleasant for me either, but I have again, I put a perspective on things. And this is a good point. Yeah. What makes it easier? Why can I do it? And I would say I put it in extreme perspectives. If I really want to do something, and then even if it's outside or especially if it's outside my comfort zone, I'll be like, well, will I die doing it?
Do you know what?
What's
That's what I do. That's my
what's
extreme.
the chance of dying?
It's like, if I'm going to die, okay, then that's the problem. But if I'm not going to die, then maybe I'll be all right.
Yeah, yeah. And there's and so she quotes the book, this guy, or quotes, but she writes in the book, she said, there's a guy, a risk scientist, David, I pulled up this thing because I figured I would talk about it. Risk scientist David Spiegelhalter, and he measures danger in micromorts, which is really funny because they're like little deaths. I love the word micromorts. So he has the units of that objectively compare the risk of death. For example, smoking 1.4 cigarettes, spending 2 months with a smoker, and traveling 230 miles in a car all carry the risk of 1 micromort. But the risk of hang gliding is 8 micromorts, and then giving birth comes in at 170 micromorts.
Wow. But is that from his perspective, though? So that's
No. This is the research that he's done, and he came up with how to objectively compare the risk of death.
That's amazing. I have to read that.
Yeah. And so, so I don't know this guy, but now, because she spoke about him, I'm going to go off on a rabbit hole, looking at what this guy's done, which is why I like Michele, and how she writes is, you're like, oh, wow, okay, I can look that up, or I can go look that up. And yeah, so that's just one of the benefits.
The reason why you went on to that is because you're talking about the 7 things that humans must absorb and learn
this is
about.
my opinion. She doesn't say that. I said, oh God, everybody needs to absorb these things. Yeah. So the one is every single decision you make is a risk decision, and a lot of people, if they absorb that, it would be. Yeah, I should say this is okay. 7 things that humans need to absorb and learn about themselves to broaden their risk awareness fingerprint. I think I can say it like that. So the thing of like, how do you build the muscle of that awareness? And so these 7 things are kind of thing. If you understand it and think about it, it'd be like, okay, if that is so, then then this. So every single decision you make is a risk decision. Some high, very high, getting in a car every day. You don't think of it as a decision, but it is. To get out and go drive on the Autobahn, for example, drive on the Autobahn in the early morning, in rush hour in Germany, or around the Paris periphery at rush hour. That's a risky thing, because it relies of everybody doing the right thing in order to keep everybody else safe. So the risk factor is fairly high. Whereas if you go through the Paris periphery in the middle of the night, it's not risky. You're like the only one on the road. Do you know what I mean? So it's like how we make our decisions. It depends on so many things. This is the complexity aspect of it. And also like the thing of like what we learned, how we learned it, and what we just know innately. There's somebody, if they're a new driver, or if they had if they learned to drive in a fearful way, where they hold the fear, so they're a very timid, scared driver. All of these things, it's so complex. It changes the risk. But then, so that your risk fingerprint is a fundamental part of your identity, which I just love that one, because people say, that's not like me, I can't do that. And I'm like, is it so? Is it so? How do you know? Is that really the way you are? Or is that a cultural thing? Is that a bias thing? And so I'm always fascinated by that when people say, that's the way I am. And I'm like, is it?
Yeah, and
I can't help
you
it.
are. Can you change it? Do you want to change it? And obviously there's an element of risk of changing yourself.
But this is the identity. They want to be that way. They're choosing to be that way. And which is fine. But as soon as somebody says an ultimatum, that's the way I am, that on the it's like, wait a second, you're choosing that, So yeah. So the other one Another one is a risk fingerprint isn't stable like an actual fingerprint. It changes with experience. So number one, your experience and skill level, and with your biases of how you perceive something or your perspective.
Oh, so for example, to put that in context, your the way you are now. So say like I'm in the UK, this is my fingerprint, but I moved into another culture that's completely different. Maybe I moved to Japan. They behave a certain way. There's a cultural difference there. And my fingerprint might change based on the experience of that location and what I'm exposed to.
Exactly. For example, I know somebody whose mother who she won't travel. She stays in a very, very small orbit, and all foreigners are bad, foreigners.
I hear that.
And so she has a fear of that. So it's very risky for her to travel because of how, her experience is very narrow. But if she were to travel, that would change. It just would, by the nature of coming into contact with people and finding out, oh, those people are actually really nice.
Yeah.
This type of thing. So that, that's malleable. That's very malleable, where a lot of people feel like it's very fixed. This is part of again, part of the identity thing. And of course, the thing I'd already said, that everyone's relationship with risk is unique and complex, and it is within ourselves. And to realize that one I have in there, because if we need to understand that about everybody else as well, and not force our biases on other people. Oh, come on, it's just like, here's an easy one. All extroverts think that introverts, there's like something wrong with them. And that there's nothing wrong with going to a big company party or such and such, and the introverts are like, oh hell no. And certain things socially seem very risky because you're not going to be able to, it's overwhelming, so you can't, you're not in control of what's going on, so it can feel very risky. But the extroverts are like, wow, what's the matter? Come on, just get in. Just it'll be fine. And it's like, for you, kind of a thing.
We see through our own eyes.
Yeah. So being aware that other people, that we're not the same. There's no one size fits all with this. The one I thought was really interesting was being cowardly actually results in taking a bigger risk. And so,
is that like the greater impacts to your like life enjoyment?
Well, yes, that's connected. That's connected to it. But what she means is that, and there's been studies, and she states who the studies of this. So I didn't write that down. You can read the book, find that out by yourself. But but I thought the concept is really interesting, and so again, we need to be careful of what we say to people. Like, oh, come on, it's just a such and such. Where somebody will be like, and I think we've all been in that situation on one side or the other at any given time. And it's like people who are like, they were saying people who jump out of an airplane with a parachute. Of course it's with a parachute, because nobody's going to jump out without a parachute. And but it's like the people who love it, and they're like, oh, this is great. So to them, that's not very risky. It's the people who are like talked into it, who don't really want to do it, but they can't stand up for themselves and draw their own boundaries. So they're actually going against their own will because they want to be liked, or they don't want to be seen as, being a wussy or somebody who's afraid.
Yes.
So the people who do that in their lives are bigger risk takers than the ones who actually do things easily and appear brave. Does that make any sense?
It does. My face is like, huh?
I know.
Because
it's counterintuitive.
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm like, no, this can't be right, because I know a lot of people pleasers, and you're accurate with they would self-soothe and make their decisions, whatever's the most comfortable thing. So having difficult conversations is like a big no-no for a people pleaser, because they'd rather be liked than to deliver the message that they need to deliver. Even
Exactly.
if that means that they are emotionally impacted or something really severely hurts them, they'd rather not have that conversation, because that fear, that
Right.
risk of being
Right.
rejected or shouted at or whatever they think is going to happen, it's just too
Right.
much to handle. But then you're saying they are the biggest risks takers, because
Yes.
they will do the thing that they are asked to do as opposed to say no, compared to someone who is self assured, very aware.
Or not necessarily aware or self-assured. They like it. And this is another
Okay.
thing that she doesn't address in the book, because it's like, if it's fun for you, it doesn't mean you're confident or self-aware. It's just fun.
And
So
there's
you
little
don't fear it.
risks. Okay, so
Yeah.
there's little risk for someone who wants to do it, because
Right.
that's their perspective of the risk
And it
versus
doesn't
the
necessarily
person.
take bravery.
Okay.
Isn't
That's
that
something I'm gonna
wild?
have to process.
I know. And so this is the, and it was just kind of a mention. It was a small thing. And I was like, wait a minute, that's enormous.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's enormous to think about in terms of human behavior, and again, personally, professionally, and alone and in groups, and like what we're asking groups to do. If we have a group, if we're responsible for a group or a company with people in it. And you can think of like Elon Musk and how he manages, this very, people are outside of their comfort zone. Now, there's a lot of people who love it and fit really well within that, but there's a lot of people who don't,
hmm
and that have to hold their voice. And so for them to speak up is extraordinary in that situation, because they're going against the grain. So the amount of bravery that it takes, if they don't say anything and they just do it, it still takes bravery and risk to do that. But to speak up when you're in the minority is incredibly risky, because of reputation. And some people, it's for, and this is, this is, a lot of this is going on right now, in the DEI sectors, the diversity, equity, and inclusiveness thing with people of color, and neurodivergence, all of them. But it's specifically, if you really combine those, a person of color who's on a marginalized, in their gender, sexuality, and neurodivergence, man alive, for somebody like that to speak up and then risk losing their job. And if you
hmm
think of somebody who's a single mother in that category, the bravery that it takes,
Yeah.
just, I think of this stuff, I can't help it. And so when I read something where she talks about being a coward actually results in taking a bigger risk, I was like, pause. I need to think about that, and then I need to talk about it, and I want to write articles about it too, because I find it fascinating.
There's always a consequence to every decision you make. And
Absolutely.
because I talk about in my coaching about life's like driving a car, whatever decision you're making. So if, say, you are a people pleaser and you're self-soothing and you take this one path, there's a consequence to that. But what I've never really considered before is, whilst you're taking those consequences, and maybe they're a negative consequence, there is a benefit of that you are taking bigger risks, and that's building up your experience of, well, I was okay, I survived, and
Right.
you learn and grow as a result. So
Right.
do then people who are cowardly, um, do they grow faster then? Is that kind of where it
That's
takes
an
them?
excellent question. I don't know. Um, I think now, if you keep repeating it, you might grow faster, but it might not necessarily be healthy. So
Yes.
it's an excellent
Mhm.
question.
Oh,
So they're actual muscles to do that, to push past a comfort zone. But I don't necessarily think it's a healthy thing, unless they're, yeah, because then it wouldn't be, it would no longer be cowardly, and they would be choosing it. It would no longer be against their will. Yeah, as soon as because there's a line that you would like a tipping point, that if the more you become aware of it, and you'd be like I don't know, am I allowed to cuss on here? Like, screw it, you can't, I'm going to do it anyway because I want to. Then they're on the other side of the line. Then they're no longer on the cowardly line. And I hate using the word cowardly, but I do understand it. I mean, it gives it a frame of reference, even though it is fairly pejorative. But there's, and well, here's the thing. It's like, and I thought, what? And so I'm going to have to look it up. I haven't looked it up yet. But I thought the study, I was like, number one, who thought up the study? Because I think a lot of every time I hear about a study, I'm like, okay, who said? What study? What study was that? And so I'm going to have to look this up. But they did like a thing with gambling, and like men specifically gambling. And so again, it's like, why just men? So I have all these questions. But they did men gambling. And so they had them in two groups. And one group, they had them hold a power drill. Like, what? And like, so my imagination, so I'm seeing this, like doing this. And the other, they had the men put on hand lotion. And the men who were put on the hand lotion,
or less risk averse?
No.
Oh,
less risk averse. Yes, that's correct. Because their masculinity was challenged. And so they had to prove that they were man. And so they took bigger risks.
Whoa.
I know, right? But then
who comes up with these experiments? Like, I love the way that people's minds think. Like, let's just get a hand drill.
Like a hand drill and lotion. And I'm sure that it was like perfumed. I'm sure that it was perfumed. But it was like, but they were, I don't know if they were with each other, or like they're all in the same room, or are they alone? I have too many questions about that. I'm like, wait a minute. So I was like sidetracked by that. When she said that, I was like, I kept reading, but then I realized my brain was still on the on the lotion and the hand drill thing. But yeah, I've got so many questions about that. But I can tell you, because my wife and I, we coach people like on the motorbike track, and we were there just this last weekend. And it made me think about the amount of accidents in the Black Forest. And so we never drove, when we lived there, we never drove on the weekends, the motorbikes, because it's like too many people are crazy. There's like what I call testosterone poisoning in the Black Forest on the weekends. And like you're not allowed to put up little flowers and like monuments for people, because so many people die on the road in the Black Forest. So they would just be like festooned with, wreaths and monuments. But it always happens because the person at the back, it's always guys, and it's always like, they're like middle-aged, so that they've had kids or whatever. And then they go back out on the bike and they want to prove that they can drive like they were 20.
Yeah.
And so these are the ones that have the most accidents. And so basically trying to prove that they're not a wussy. And so they're overriding their, their fear factor, and they're pushing the edge on it. And they're trying to keep up with the group instead of saying, hey, you guys go, I'll meet you at the next place. And so they're taking the biggest risks. And that shit's risky.
Any, like, because what I'm hearing from you is that there's a lot of self-awareness that takes place with assessing risk, because you need to know yourself to really evaluate the risk that you are taking.
Right.
What are the actionable steps, if any, for someone to go through that? You've got the awareness, but then applying it to yes, be safe, but also grow.
Yeah. And that's a great question, but it's, it's the awareness part of it, and asking yourself the questions, why am I choosing this? And on a scale of 1 to 10, what is uncomfortable? Why is it uncomfortable? How am I feeling about that? How many people do you know ask themselves these questions? This is the thing that I find interesting about this. And she doesn't go really deep into it. Not what I think is deep, not as deep as I would go into it. She's kind of laying out the framework with it in the book. It's like a starting point. But again, a ton of research, but I love it because it's a perfect starting point to ask ourselves all these questions.
Mm-hmm.
And what does it look like for us? And what does our risk fingerprint look like? And she kind of has a thing in there about mapping it out. It's like a compass, your risk compass. So you can kind of get a good idea of like, okay, what do you prefer on this or this or this or this? And so when you're looking at something, and how much of it is just, well, and I think of it having to do with the book Wanting, huge overlap with the intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. So being aware of what you actually want and what's motivating you or affecting you extrinsically. But it's like, if we don't know that, we're doing stuff blind. Very, very low awareness on all of it, I've noticed. Yeah. And when I start talking about it, people are like, what? And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I should teach a workshop about that. Anytime I come up with something that people don't, seem either to know about or like, well, what do you do about that? Then it's like, oh yeah, workshop.
Is there a way of like getting people to challenge the way that they think? Because like you said earlier, like culturally, what do you call it? Something bias. Is it like confirmation bias or culture bias?
Well, there's a lot of biases come in like every shade and flavor of, we're biased about everything. Mm-hmm. We're biased about, just everything in our lives. We have a particular take or idea about, and it's, family culture, community culture, country culture, you name it.
Okay. Well, let's call them the biases then.
The biases. The biases.
Is there a way to kind of help you expand your thinking and see it from different perspectives to really truly evaluate a situation so that you can grow through it?
Quick answer, yes. The how, that's a longer road. And it depends. It starts with somebody wanting to be aware. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people that I come across, I would say the majority of people I come across, it's like, I don't need that, I'm fine. So like, okay, so I don't even, they aren't my clients, they aren't the people in that category. I have to leave them to themselves. There's nothing I can do for them. Certainly not, I'm not on the thing of everybody should be. I don't think like that. It's like, it's everybody, you have to, like that, the saying, you have to meet people where they are. Mm-hmm. You also have to leave people where they are as well. And for example, the people that gravitate and are magnetically drawn to what you do, they already have a propensity for looking for something. They're looking for answers that you're obviously, emanating. And so they're like, oh, okay, that looks good. That looks like a fit that I want. So it's somebody who's already on the path, if mm-hmm. that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And so then you can offer it even to these people, but you still can't make them change. And some people change quicker than others. Some people are more open to it than others. So you can lay it out like a buffet, and then just pay attention to who's just like snacking and who's just like, and they're like, oh, that person, that would be a good client. They're ready for it, and they're eating at the buffet, and then they're looking towards the kitchen to what else are you bringing out, So these types of people, if you can notice them, these are the ones that make the good clients for whatever it is we're doing. And those people, you can help them change at a very rapid pace. Mm-hmm. Because they're ready.
They're open to the risk.
They're open to it.
Through that journey of being curious about themselves, curious about the world, and going beyond their current understanding. And they are then taking those actions. They're the ones that are likelier to grow faster.
Right. And some people, it's been a journey to get to that point.
Yeah.
Other people were born that curious.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They don't all come on a long journey and arrive at that point.
Yeah.
So it just depends on what kind of animal we have in front of us at any given time. There's a lot of overlap for sure. but that's what makes it interesting.
Before we ask the final yellow question, I've got one that might take us off on a tangent. I don't know. So let's stick.
Oh no, I hate that.
I was thinking about like manipulation and how organizations, companies like to manipulate people, and they will study this to get what they want, their power, money,
Absolutely.
whatever their driver might be.
Mhm.
And where there's risks, there's an easy way from what I see. Maybe this is just obvious for me. There's an easy way of confusing people on what they perceive as risk so that they can keep doing the thing I want them to do. So, for example, cigarettes. Cigarettes was the research was funded by the cigarette companies,
Right.
and it's like it's absolutely fine. And I remember seeing loads of posters. I wasn't, around at that time, but I mean,
Yeah.
reflecting on the internet,
Right.
posters that were about, and there'll be a pregnant woman smoking, and there'll be no
Oh yeah.
problem. And then the organizations would manipulate those risks of people to see doubt in their minds by saying, "Oh no, this is not a problem. Um, this research is incorrect," and kind of like debunk it just to get people to still do the thing that they want to do. So there's doubt, how does that play into risk, and how could someone be aware of it so that they are truly evaluating a situation for themselves and not being manipulated by someone else to gain control?
Love the question. And this is where the podcast went from half an hour into 3 hours. And no, I love it. And it's like what you're just, the example you just gave is like outright deception. And some people can see that. A lot of people can't. And I mean, if you want to talk about some of the social media platforms, Instagram and Facebook and, fear of missing out. These are all kind of insidious, the dark arts of marketing that you're talking about. And then in other companies, there's like low grade to high grade bullying that is going on, and how to keep people in their place. It's like, for example, with women, instead of promoting a woman as a man, they would say, oh, he's assertive, and a woman will be bitchy. You understand? So it's like how we speak about things. There's all these ways of gatekeeping that goes on, that can be, either full on aggressive or passive aggressive. And so I always watch out for those types of things that, for some people it's not a risk at all, but then they do put up the barriers, and it's very risky for other people to do the exact same thing because they're not in the favored, valued category. Which brings me to the last point that I have on here of whoever controls the definition of risk controls the rational solution to the problem. Now, just that sentence alone, it's like where do we begin to unpack that?
Yeah.
Because that's around, like who holds the power of defining the risk. Again, somebody says, yeah, that's nothing, and somebody says, yeah, well, I should, we need to go out and do this, or something has to be done. And you have a white man, moneyed, in power, saying, oh, that's nothing, that's easy, you just got to go out and do it. And then you have these other people like, okay, their reputations might be on the line. And if they lose a job, how easy it is to get another job of that position at that pay with there's, what am I going to do with my kids? Should I, it's like, tack, 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 tack. The mental calculation that we go through that we don't even realize at any given time. And so for some people, that's absolutely like exhausting. And so the people in a privilege, just naturally by, the lottery of how they're born and where they're born and who they're born to and what country, they do less of that. It's less of a drag on their energy. Whereas other people, depending on where they were and how they were raised and what they're dealing with psychologically and experience-wise and position, that drag is much heavier. And so, when you're talking about the burnout type thing, I mean, it touches everything. Yeah.
Yeah. But the doubt parts, doubting people. So if you can control the risk, and this is where maybe organizations, if they put out enough PR, they could convince you the risk is worthy. So yeah, just have a
They do all the
cigarette. All
time.
the celebrities are smoking. Oh, look, you could be pregnant and you can have a cigarette. Oh, you look cool. And the information
Well,
that
that's
goes out.
outright deception. But what about now? Because that's outright deception. That's easy to see. Okay, the things that are
At
not
the time,
so.
it wasn't. So I wonder
No,
what's
but
happening
I'm
now.
saying that's outright deception. That's
Yeah.
like Facebook saying we don't tweak things. You're perfectly safe. We're not selling your information. We're not, and it's like, hell yes, they are. And it's like, for example, the women's fertility apps. They're selling all that information. That's some scary shit. All these women's information is being sold right now. And right now there's a big thing, and it's up in, I think in the Netherlands, and they're saying, get off the apps. Because they say, no, we're good. We're like responsible with your information. Don't worry. But then they sell their company, didn't tell anybody. And all their information is sold. All their contact information, so now everybody gets ads about something. You're just like, what? So this is outright deception, as far as I'm concerned. And so it's shitty. It's there's any number of level of that, but that's clear cut. The ones that aren't clear cut are the ones that I find. Well, of course, I find it interesting, but it's interesting in a negative way, and it's worthy of having light shown on it, and into the dark corners and shadows of it are the things that are not so clear. But that has to do with a lot with culture and the shaming of people and the putting pressure on people and saying. Now it's not that bad, because then it's like we're gaslighting.
Yeah,
we don't even realize we're in a risky area. So that's what I think is important to try and be aware of. But how do you be aware of something you don't know, you're not aware of? And so that can be exhausting. I personally find it fascinating. So my awareness of that is very high. But sometimes when I talk to people about some of this stuff, they just roll their eyes and they go, "Ugh, I just can't. And I'm like, okay, I understand that asking people to be aware of that is putting a load on everybody's maxed out bandwidth to begin with, which is why people do it, because they know people aren't going to pay attention. That makes me angry. It makes me want to be an advocate, for for the people who don't. I don't know. One of the lines on here that she says is, having a sense of purpose and involvement heightens your awareness of risk, which I could say is absolutely true. Because of my fascination with it. Of course, my awareness is higher. So I can't, I want to say save everybody from risk, but maybe a little bit here and there, and that's all I pretty much can do.
Yeah, same with my yellow message. I've got something that's so inviting and draws me to it. So whenever I get something that's risky, like a presentation, let's say, that's a risk, getting on stage and speaking to people. But I think about the vision for the world and what I'm working towards. And it's like, actually, Tammy, you just need to get on with it. Yes, it's risky to you, but you'll be fine. You're not going to die.
Right. Again, am I going to lose an arm or a leg? No. Where in fact, it's like when you get out, you go out in the car to like go to the market, it's like, could I die? It's like, yes. But if I sit in front of the computer and do everything that I'm doing, like, I can't die, but people feel like, even if they post something, it's like, oh, that was horrible, and they get a bunch of negative feedback and they go, there goes my reputation. I'm like, no, just post something else,
Yeah.
And it's not the end of the world. But we're like, we're where we are in this era is that, what can happen to us? We're like tunnel vision almost, so it's like the thing is broadening the perspective I'm like, okay, when we're 85 and 90, is this going to be that big of a deal? Probably not, So let it go.
Okay, yellow question.
Yes.
What would the future look like if everyone read this book?
That's yeah. Oh. I would be I don't know is a short answer. I would be super curious what marketing would look like in the future if everybody.
Yes.
Yeah, huh? And then if everybody read this book, okay, not everybody would apply it or think about it, like, yeah, whatever. There's going to be tons of people who read this book and like, yeah, I've heard it all before, and not go any deeper or not think about it in the context of like that one sentence about the whoever controls the definition of risk. Somebody could read that sentence and go, yeah, whatever. But it's like, really, if you thought about it and then talked about say the people in your company or your clients about it who are designing things, and designing products, whether it's services or a hard product, yeah, like how do we affect that? And so that I find interesting. So it's not going to be everybody can read the book, they're going to take away something completely different from it. But I like to think that if enough of us are talking about things, we kind of start sort of a groundswell of bringing things forward or to a next level. Yeah, this is I'll stop there because again, I feel very passionately about that. We can't save everybody, but we can be a pebble tossed in to affect a ripple effect. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for the book review.
You're welcome. I'm really liking these, by the way.
Welcome to Go to Yellow. Subscribe to our channel to learn how to redefine success and restore life balance. If you like this video, please give it a like, leave a comment below. But remember to turn off the notifications because we want you to live your life and not to be controlled by the ping. May your life be yellow.